Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fake Philosophers. I'm Mike. There's Eddie.
Hello.
There's Danny. Say hello to the folks, Danny.
You have to tell them to say hello.
There's 15 people out there who watch this because of you.
All
Hello,
15.
15 people,
There you
15
go. Yep.
religious, diehard fans.
3 of them
willing
are
to take
mine.
bullets
After
for
that,
pennies.
5 of them are Eddie's. All right. So today, I should boot my phone.
Mute your phone.
So unprofessional.
So unprofessional. So today, I'd like to talk about, I think, a learning moment. This is why I called for this episode. Of taking in media and analyzing appropriately without getting too over sensationalized. The Olympics. So I'm gonna open up with we're talking about the boxer. What was her name? I didn't want the name
Yeah,
right.
we should get names and things straight.
Algerian
If you
boxer.
type in Olympic boxer like I did, that's the primary name
It
that
comes
comes
up.
up.
So
It's Iman.
Aman Khalif.
Yeah.
Aman Khalif. All right. So this whole controversy, I'm sure everyone knows a little bit about it. I want to explain my experience with it and why I think it's kind of a teachable moment, and then I want to get your guys' responses to it. So sometime last week in one of my many group chats that I'm in, somebody posted about this, and it was just a clip of the 46 seconds, and I think the caption was something along the lines of 46 seconds in, Italian female boxer gives up and doesn't want to fight trans boxer. And at a glance, even because we don't have to go into our stances on the issue, but I will say I am against trans females in combat sports. We can have that discussion later. That's my stance on it. But so when I saw that, I was like, oh, that fucking sucks. Like, that's not right. I think my response to the clip in the chat was, I'm cool with the trans community, but I don't like this. And then as I explored it, um, the story began to change to where I was looking into it, and it was like, oh no, this is actually a female. This person grew up in Algeria, which is a very conservative country, and it's illegal to be trans there. This is not a trans person. She has a vagina, like she grew up female. She just is masculine. And then the argument came out, well, no, she tested out of the world competition last year because the IBA did test on her and she failed the eligibility test based on her chromosomes or testosterone. The story are kind of mixed. And I was like,
I believe
oh,
it was her testosterone levels.
sure. I've heard testosterone level, and I've heard that her chromosomes came up male, so she was disqualified. And I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder what the difference is between Olympic qualifications and IBA qualifications, whatever. And then, so I was like, still, like, if that's the case, I understand it, but it's still kind of murky now. And that raised a bunch of other questions too. So if a woman is born natural female with high testosterone levels or chromosomes off, does that make her a man? I've heard that argument being made. But then that also begs other questions. If men who have low testosterone levels, should they be considered women? Even if they have testicles, a penis, etc. If their testosterone levels are too low, should they be considered women? There's just all these questions that are being begged based on this argument. Then looking further into it, it turns out, and this is where it gets even more murky. The IBA already has tons of like controversies under their belt. That's why the Olympics don't fuck with them anymore. They're also led, at least at the time, the CEO was like this Russian dude who's kind of like a Putin Russian, like, don't fuck with him. And on top of that, Khalif was disqualified after she was already entered the competition, and she beat a female boxer who was Russian and undefeated. So it wasn't until after she already entered the competition, beat this Russian fighter who was like a prize fighter, undefeated fighter. That's when the CEO and I think one other person just unilaterally said she's disqualified because she failed the gender test or whatever test it was. And I think at first they didn't really release the details of the test or how they tested her or what the test included. They just said she's disqualified. So even like objectively, I guess that process was not due process. And Khalif tried to appeal it, and she ended up giving up. I guess the competition took too long, whatever. So with all that in mind, it's kind of like this story that started with a false premise of this is a transgender female fighting in the Olympics and unfairly beating another fighter. It's a lot deeper than that, a lot more context. And at the end of the day, it seems like it's just a female fighter who has masculine traits and who's a fucking good fighter And even the Italian boxer who gave up, she didn't really say anything about like transgender females shouldn't be in the sport or any of that. She just said, I've never been hit that hard in my life, and I was scared. And even she said the Olympics should determine if that person's willing to fight or not. She never said anything against transgender females, just said, I was scared because I've never been hit that hard in my life. So the point, which is what, because like to the audience, our kind of recording schedule now is just if we feel like talking about something, we'll record. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk about this, because in previous episodes, we've mentioned how philosophy, critical thinking, media literacy, all things that should be taught in schools in the core basis, not as an elective or a specialty, should be taught in the core curriculum. I think starting in middle school, just because things like this, and like I said, I fell for it at first. I had an emotional response to it, but it turns out it was all just kind of bullshit. And she's just a female who grew up masculine in a conservative country it's not legal to be trans there. So with all that in mind, I want to get your guys' perspective on the entire story, which whoever wants to start first.
Well, just what are the chromosomes? XX or XY? That
So
tells it.
so that's your stance on at least the fighting. Forget the physical body, the chromosomes are what matter.
Chromosomes are what matter. Yes.
Right.
That distinguishes between what's a man and a woman. We're not lizards and other things that maybe have Z or W chromosomes. We're humans. So that's what determines sex, your chromosomes.
So not the body, the physical body.
No.
Okay. So and it's unclear whether or not, I think from what I've read, it seems kind of bullshit what the Russian guy did and claimed was true. And granted, I guess they're saying that they don't release the actual record of the test because of privacy, which I do understand. But as of right now, it kind of looks suspicious. So I really don't think there's a definitive answer what her chromosomes are or aren't. But so that's where you stand on the issue. Danny, what do you have to say about it?
I'm pretty much in the same boat. If she's a biological female, and I'm sorry, but genetics is what determines a good athlete. Genetics and training. And if like Iman has, and just like Michael Phelps has, if you devote your life to training and perfecting your craft, be it painting, music, boxing, swimming, some might call that unfair. It's a sacrifice. You have devoted your life to being perfect at one thing. Great, good for you. And so I don't think anybody has any room to say it's unfair because genetically she's superior at this sport. If you've ever looked at Michael Phelps, the dude's fucking weird looking. Like he's got super long arms, a lithe, thin body, huge ass shoulders. Now, like he looks weird, sure. The guy has trained his whole life to be an Olympic medaling swimmer. And I'm sorry, but if his genetics somehow make him better in the water, you can't fault him for that. The same thing goes for Iman. Her genetics have made her particularly suited for this sport, and she chose to capitalize on that. Somebody might have looked at her when she was, younger and said, "Hey, you got a good build for a boxer. You want to box?" And she probably said, "Yeah, let's try it." And she realized she was good, and it led her to this moment in time.
So were you in agreement with Eddie, or are you disagreeing with him?
No, I'm in agreement. Like she is a biological female. She was born female. If her chromosomes are the same as they were when she was born, which they likely are, then I don't think anybody has any right to say she shouldn't compete. She can't compete.
Well, where did the transgender argument come in?
Well, the transgender that came up because everyone called her transgender when she's not. That's how this whole thing started.
Interesting.
So to clarify, Danny, I think, and Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, your stance, Eddie, is this: despite the body, like she has, a vagina, she's a woman. If her chromosomes inside are that of a man, she shouldn't compete with women. Was that yours?
I think women should compete with women, and men should compete with men.
And the chromosome is superior to the physical body. Okay. And then Danny, you said the chromosome doesn't matter.
No, I mean, I'm kind of with Eddie there too. But again, like, yeah, because a trans a man transitioning to a woman is going to have the same chromosomes.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, I mean, to Eddie's point, yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Okay. So I'm not taking a stance. I just want to make sure I understand everyone's point of view. So hypothetically, because I don't believe the reason why she was disqualified in the world competition was because of her chromosomes. I think the Russian was pulling Russian shit and disqualified her because their guy was their girl was beaten. That's my opinion. But if it
That's
comes
feasible as well.
yeah, so Danny, just to make sure I understand, if it turns out that she does have the male chromosome, you would agree she shouldn't fight with the females.
Yeah, I would agree because
Okay.
I mean, because she's in a women's sport and she's not, biologically a woman.
Okay.
I can already feel the hate.
No, I find this very interesting. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
Well, here's the thing.
What's interesting about it?
It's
It's
deceptive.
just-
If you are claiming to be a biological woman and you are not a woman, then you have already broken a trust and have violated something, some kind of policy, I'm sure, and that's a problem. So if you have to deceive your way into getting into this sport, that's a problem.
Well,
And
I think there's truth to the deception part of it. I think there's truth to that. I would agree with that. Just kind of philosophically, and I'm honestly not judging at all. It's complicated because like if this woman, Khalif, grew up a woman, vagina, breast, everything, and just turns out her chromosomes are that of a male, that to me that opens up more questions of how we judge. So like hypothetically, if I mean not one of us obviously, but if an athlete grew up a male, testicles, penis, hard bod, beard, and it turns out his chromosomes are that of a female, should he be allowed to compete with females?
well, then he wouldn't have a ball and testicles.
No, that's what we're talking about. Khalif she grew up she has a vagina, she has breast,
Okay.
but she never transitioned into a female. She was a born biological female. But if it turns out she does have the chromosome of a male, like people are claiming, in my opinion, falsely, should she not be able to compete with females now?
Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Okay, so I'm not judging. I'm actually asking an honest question. If a born male grows up, dick, testicles, beard, kind of masculine features, but it turns out his chromosomes are actually that of a female in that rare condition, should he be allowed to compete with females?
To me, it's all about the chromosomes.
So yes. So yes.
I'll give a blanket yes. Men,
Okay.
XX competes with XX, XY competes with XY. Very simple. Doesn't matter what you're like on the outside. It just matters what those chromosomes are, and that's who you're competing with.
Okay.
I see the point you're bringing up here, Mike, because that creates a very big gray area.
Well, I think socially, I like, or scientifically, I actually am agreeing with Eddie. Scientifically, like on paper. Again, I want to make it clear, I don't think Khalif has male chromosomes. I don't think that's been proven yet. But socially, that's where I'm kind of getting. Socially, it is kind of,
Like if you find out that like somebody like Mike Tyson actually has a double X chromosome, and he wants to compete with women now, like what do you say to that? That's
yeah. Well, it's kind of like, and this is a whole different thing, but it's like I remember this argument was made to where like they're like, oh, whatever you have between your legs, that's what bathroom you use. And so if I was a transgender male and I looked like I look, you want me going in the women's room? Like just the way I look if I had a vagina? Kind of the same thing. Like, and the thing is, I want to make sure it's clear. I kind of agree with Eddie's point about the chromosomes because that does affect testosterone, your body strength, and everything. But there is a social aspect of it. If we go off of that, yeah, like Danny, like you said, like if you or I or Eddie, like we're all masculine looking dudes, but if we have the XX chromosome, cool. Like, so I can go compete with women.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, how come this is only one way though? How come nobody no women who transition to men want to fight Brock Lesnar? Why is that?
That's a fair
Why is that?
Well, that's a fair point. I think that's I've always thought that argument too.
How many females who have transitioned to male are competing against other males in the Olympics? Why is it one way? we're talking fairness.
That's actually a question I've thought about as well.
Mhm.
If I'm just being honest.
Well, that's the underlying thing. The thing is here, what we're talking about is people who want a distinct advantage in their competitions,
Mhm.
right? And obviously, the man who transitions into uh, a woman is going to have a distinct advantage in strength-based, endurance-based
Mhm.
competition. And I'll preface this right now: none of us are scientists. None of us are
Fair, fair.
athletes. um,
Eddie's the closest, probably.
Eddie's probably the closest.
Okay.
We're all cis white men with no doctorates. Um, but I mean, the evidence is out there that in physical sports, men have a distinct advantage, and we've seen it throughout history, time and time again. Was it recently? Like the women's U.S. national team played the Wrexham football club, and were blown out like 11-1 or
Mhm.
11-0.
Yeah, and I think that does have something to do with, especially, I mean, you could talk about the chromosomes with the testosterone level, because that's what they, when someone's transitioning, either way, you either lower your testosterone or you raise your testosterone.
Mhm.
And I do think there's a level of it to where, like, I don't think, maybe I'm naive or I'm optimistic for once. I think for the most part, when a biological male transitions to trans female and they just want to play sports, I think they just want to play sports. I don't think they do it for the advantage. Um, but there could be an advantage. And I've seen cases where, there are like testosterone suppressants and like actual things that you can take to where that advantage is taken away. And I don't, like Danny, you said, I don't know the science behind it, so I can't really claim that I do. But if that's the case to where it levels the playing field, then like, what the fuck ever, you know?
Mhm. Then again, do we allow steroids? Do we allow other
Yeah,
enhancing drugs into the Olympics? But that one's okay.
I mean, I'm all for let all the athletes take whatever they want, and let's just see what happens.
There should be that Olympics.
Yeah,
That would be very interesting to watch.
the Chaos Olympics.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
so
well,
go
you
on.
can see that like a German team, East German team in the 70s, where they're, doing steroids and everything. You notice a difference in the women. They're buff and they got hair under their arms. Well, they'd have hair under their arms anyway, but damn, they are buff. So if you have just, yeah, well, that'd be an interesting way to go. Just kind of sell out and say, okay, you're in this league,
I
you do
mean,
steroids, go for it. You want to do coke?
I mean,
Sure. Whatever makes people,
Just not while before and after the whistle blows, not in between. You do everything
yeah,
I want
exactly.
outside.
do you guys remember when Mark McGuire was trying to beat Roger Maris's home run record in that
Yes.
whole baseball season?
Mm.
You remember how fucking entertaining that whole season was? Like the regular season, watching Mark McGuire try to beat this home run record, and then the fucking All-Star game and the home run derby. How fucking awesome it was to watch. And then you found out, like a little while after that, he was like just had an IV drip of HGH the whole time.
Mm.
I
It's
think
like,
him,
It's
him and Sosa,
entertaining.
right?
We like
huh?
performance, but we want natural performance.
Yeah. No, that's not fucking entertaining. Give me rated up Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire any day, and that is entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I think for professional sports, I have no problem with that.
Hmm.
If you want to juice yourself up and you take the risk of fucking with your
Yeah,
body that way,
yeah.
please. Now, granted, I know it'll probably scare people off who don't want to do that, which fine, don't take the risk. But I can see keeping the
Play college.
Olympics, yeah, keep the Olympics kind of clean so it's like fair play. I get that. Keep everyone on the same level. Um, but yeah, and
I,
go on.
I, well, I think there's going to be a new league. Just you stating that, uh, just kind of currency is based off of attention now. So if you just open up the league and say, okay, we can't do it in this country, but in this country, if you didn't make the NFL, we'll open up a football league where you can dope your ass off. Go ahead.
Just
We're going to get
violent.
Saudi
bus
Arabia.
seats, and you're going to be throwing that football, and people are going to be running, and there's going to be concussions. Don't watch it. Whatever you do, don't watch it.
I mean, look at the UFC when that started.
Yeah.
It's kind of, how do you it's kind of like watered down now, but if you remember those first couple of years of the UFC, dear God,
Yeah,
that was violent as fuck.
Yeah, and then you get to fight again.
Mhm.
And the way it started making money is that they added rules. Okay, you only fight once, and you got to work your way up. It just got
Yep.
organized. Because then I think, what was it, UFC 2 or 3? Just somebody who was a ringer came in and just won because Frank Shamrock got hurt. All right, he was some retired police dude. All right, you're a champion.
Perfect. Yeah, so going back to it though, not necessarily specifically the whole trans issue with the Khalif and all that, but the point that kind of I was trying to make going into it, and I think our discussion was good, is just the sensational problem with how that was presented. Because it was a story, like I said, a teachable moment to where that story blew up for no fucking reason. Other than this woman happened to have masculine features, which a lot of women who are in shape do. And this whole story blew up. I feel bad for her. I don't know what she's going through with her family and all this shit. Because like I said, as of right now, I'm under the impression that her chromosomes are female. She's a female. She's just in shape. That's right now my truth of it.
And if it was we're talking about it. It sells newspapers. You type in Olympic boxer, that's the hits you're going to get under news. What if it were determined that that boxer is a biological man?
By the chromosome, I think it raises a question. I think you guys made good points about your thoughts on the chromosome. But assuming as of right now that she's not, that her chromosomes are female, the bigger point that I was more trying to get to is just these levels of, I don't want to say the disinformation because that term's thrown around so much, but assuming she is just female chromosomes, everything, this story blew up for no fucking reason. And that's kind of where I went back to the philosophy, the critical thinking, the media literacy of knowing how to look at something. Because I fell for this shit too. Like I said, I saw the video and I was like, oh, fuck, that sucks. But people look at this stuff, it spreads. No one questions it. No one actually takes a moment to say, is this true? And it spreads like wildfire. And now, again, this is under the assumption that she has female chromosomes. She's a female. This woman's being attacked for being trans when she's not. And you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I was getting at with and there's other examples, but this one just kind of stuck out to me to where Danny, perfect example in our group chat. JD Vance fucking a couch.
Yeah.
If you pay Eddie, do you know that story or no? So some guy on like fucking Reddit or 4chan, some website made a joke about how it's called Hillbilly Elegy, right? Elegy?
Yeah.
The book that JD Vance wrote. This guy on some random thread somewhere on Reddit or something made a joke about how in Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance talks about how when he was, I don't forget if he's a young adult or a teenager or whatever, but at some point in his life, using a plastic glove, he fucked a couch, like between the couch cushions. It was a fucking dumb joke. And now, granted, it's been debunked, but I'll admit it. I was like, I can see that. And like a lot of people thought that shit was real. There's people that still think it's real. And this shit went viral. And it was, I mean, it's obvious, like that's obviously a stupid, if I ever did that, I would never write it in the book. But it's a stupid thing that went viral and there's people who still believe it. And it's so mainstream now that even, what's his name? Walls, who's running VP for Harris, he made a joke about it in his opening speech. Like, and it's all bullshit. That's kind of my point is like there is a lack of just the critical thinking and media literacy where people take these things. Like I said, I didn't question the couch thing because I thought it was funny and I could see him doing that. Not just because Vance is a weirdo, but because growing up, you do weird shit when you're going through puberty. I'm sure we've all done weird shit when we were learning how to jerk off. And so I kind of looked at it more like that, but it was a bullshit story. Like it's not in the book. Even the guy, I guess they interviewed him. He was as anonymous. He said like, I didn't know that was going to go mainstream, but like I'm kind of think it's funny. And that's kind of more where I was getting at, was with that kind of angle on it was,
So it's more media sensationalism than it is talking about, the ethics of biological men fighting women. It's more
Yeah.
kind of a critical, because quite frankly, coming into this before we even started talking, that's what I thought this show was going to be about. And it's not about
Sure.
that, because what have I been reading and what have the assumptions been? Because why else would it be blown up if there weren't something? And the reason it gets blown up is because people are talking about it. And if you're a lazy news writer and need something to write about, you've got the entire Olympics. You could talk about Norway, or you could talk about the transgender Algerian, where he's not supposed to be transgender, but is not even transgender.
yeah, that's kind of, I don't even know. Go on, Danny.
Finish your point, because I want to kind of transition to something.
Cool. So like, and there's a lot of examples of this, and granted, like the title of this episode will have nothing to do with critical thinking. It'll 100% have something to do with the transsexual boxer. Because why? We want some views.
Feeding the machine.
I'd like to beat 25 views every now and then, and this might get it. But even like you look at a lot of examples, and I think in one of our chats, Danny, I mentioned this. Even like you look at, there's a whole joke that's to this day still made that Nancy Pelosi's an alcoholic. I still make that joke. That joke was based on a video that was heavily edited to make her speech like faster and slower to make her look drunk. Years later, and granted, I'm not a fan of Pelosi, so I still think it's funny, but years later, people still call her Alcoholic Nancy based on a fake video. And even like Michelle Obama, people call her, a lot of like crazy MAGA folks swear to God she's transgender. Because I think she wore a dress one day that had like just straps or something, and you saw that she had really cut arms. And so people are like, transgender, look how masculine she is. And that's still a thing that goes on. It's like these things happen all the time. So many stories that just kind of go viral, affect people's opinions, and no one really takes the time on either side of the question. Like I said, I thought JD Vance fucked his couch. And it was probably a week later where I was like, oh, this is actually bullshit. Of course it was bullshit. Why would he write that? But just in the moment, I was like, oh yeah, of course this is real. And so that was kind of the argument that if I had a thesis, is that this is a prime example of why media literacy and philosophy needs to be studied, I'd say by middle school, and it should be a core subject going through high school. Danny, transition.
Yes.
Yeah. Transition. So we've all been ensnared by this story of Iman Khalif and Angela Carini. What's been slightly brushed over, and I can only thank the internet for kind of putting the this or that up with a guy named Steven van de Velde. He's a Dutch volleyball player who was convicted of rape of a 12-year-old girl and allowed to compete. And I've only seen it kind of pretty much on social media that he's been allowed to compete. He only did less than 4 years in prison for this. And he's still allowed to compete for his national team, which is amazing. Just blows my mind. But, the Dutch. Mike, I know you have a strong opinion about the Dutch.
Danny, no. I think everyone should be... Never mind.
Pay for their own meal. That's what he thinks.
Danny, there's two things in this world I hate. People who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch.
Yep. But like the fact that this story, and it's only because it's a hot button story, it is a hot topic. This whole transgender athletes thing, that it's being carried way further than it should have ever have gone. Nobody did their due diligence in reporting it. They just heard transgender female and Italian boxer crying and decided, let's run that. But nobody is even like shining a light other than social media.
The memes.
People on social media. The memes, yeah. Which, thank God for meme culture, because if we didn't have it, like this might have gone completely under the radar. But this guy, this fucking asshole, meets this 12-year-old girl online, has a meetup with her in England, is arrested, and imprisoned for rape for less than 4 years. Gets out, starts competing in volleyball again, and makes the Dutch Olympic team and is sent to the Olympics, and the Olympics allows it.
So here's a question, kind of like we were talking about earlier, where if a competitor kind of like is deceitful about their deceitful, excuse me, about their gender identity or their chromosomes, whatever, was it that the Dutch team, you might not know this, did the Dutch team like know ahead of time and just be like, who cares? Or was it kind of one of those things that they didn't really even look into it?
I'm sure the guy was in prison for about 4 years. And I'm sure, like, when you get an athlete, and I don't know the Netherlands, I don't know, how Dutch, the Dutch Olympic Committee does stuff, but I'm pretty sure in America we background check our athletes. If for nothing else, optics.
Well, you're taking a very American stance on that too.
That's true. That's true.
Because the Dutch are very tolerant. Haven't been to Amsterdam. I didn't go anyplace else. But understanding that culture, it does make sense. Because then you go, okay, the guy went to prison. What does he do now? What should he be allowed to do? Now, there's adversely, there's the other video. Well, okay, so this is the Olympics and this is sport. There's that one where a guy comes on. It's the boomerang clip. If you've ever seen that boomerang clip, where the show host comes in and he can't stop laughing at this guy who has sexual dysfunction, sounds like a woman, his wife's paralyzed, and they get deep with it. And he can't stop laughing because he's laughing at the guy's voice, because he just came in from a traffic jam. He got there late, didn't have time for a pre-interview, didn't get the vibe. So he still has a job as a radio announcer, but Boomerang was canceled that day. There was no tolerance for that. But so there's kind of a limit, but I do see it on their end where it's like, we're Americans, it's a sex crime. Somebody was wrong. Somebody innocently was taken advantage of. On the other hand, they serve their time. They're good with the Dutch government.
I see what
I would
you're
argue
saying.
that he didn't serve his time.
Say again?
I would argue that he didn't serve his time.
Okay.
I don't think 4 years is an adequate sentence for that crime.
I see what Eddie's saying though, that on paper,
legally speaking,
he balanced the scales, if you will. He did something bad, then he served the time. Like, I understand what Eddie's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that, especially with sex crimes in America, that we don't. I think in America, any sex crime, if it's like less than 20 years, we're like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Which I agree with. Like, I'm not even like.
Well, I'm not sure any other country would have done that either. I'm not sure any other country would be as tolerant and as forgiving as the Dutch culture, as the Dutch government is.
When you say that, because you would know better, and I'm actually kind of curious. When you say like forgiving, is it because like they're just forgiving of crime in general, or they're just more comfortable with like the underage kind of stuff? I'm actually just
tolerant of
asking.
everything. They know it exists, and they don't shove it under the rug. And there are even like public service announcements. If you've got a problem, see somebody before it becomes a problem. Things aren't swept under the rug like they are here in America, and we don't talk about it. And then it becomes a problem. And it's so swept under the rug that we don't believe anybody when they're telling the truth. That's how Larry Nassar gets away with it.
That's actually an interesting topic too. Because our friend, we all know DJ. DJ told me he was listening to the radio or something, and I forgot what the context of it was, but the discussion came to pedophilia, and someone called the show anonymously and kind of made the point, and this is kind of, I hope is what kind of you were alluding to, Eddie. He made the point to say, like, listen, I'm calling anonymously because like I don't want anyone. I think he even had like a voice change, like I don't want anyone to know who I am. He's like, I have had sexual feelings towards children. Mm-hmm. He's like, I have not acted on them, but I've had these feelings, and it haunts me. And like we all know, like sexual feelings do haunt at you, especially if like you can't act on them. they do haunt at you. It can be anything as innocent as like different positions, whatever. And if your partner doesn't want to do them, it gets to you. You want to do it. Like it's a fucking urge, right? And so he made the point. He's like, I've had these feelings. I can't go to a fucking therapist and work this out. Because if I go to a therapist to work it out, I'm going to get judged. They're going to file a report on me because I'm a threat to children. And granted, I want to say I am not defending any fucking pedophile who's acted on it. I'm not defending any of that shit. But there is a stigma. And I think that I'm hoping that's what you're alluding to, Eddie, that if you are a pedophile, just because that's your way your brain works, you really can't seek treatment because of the stigma.
In certain countries, you can.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying in America.
Yeah, in America, no, that would be. We treat it as it's an affliction. You know, crimes against children, it's an affliction, especially sex crimes. Any sex crimes, we treat it as an affliction. It's treated differently over there. I'm not condoning that in any way, but if it's a problem, it's something that should be addressed rather than swept under the rug.
And that's kind of what I was getting to, is that this guy on this phone call was saying, he's like, I haven't acted on it, I haven't done it, but it's still in my brain and I hate it. But he was so worried about seeking therapy, counseling, something to fix it. And that was kind of his point about it. And that's where kind of I thought you were alluding to.
And nobody's getting help. You know, I didn't realize that. You know, you should never be afraid to go to a therapist. I think that's I don't know.
And he could have been being a little bit dramatic to where maybe he could find a very specialized therapist that could help him, but that was his feeling, was I can't seek help for this because of the shame that comes with it and the judgment that's going to be made on me.
If he really wanted to get help, I think it's more that latter part. Because if that anonymous person really wanted to get help, they could find it even in the United States. I just think this is my armchair psychologist approach. I just think they're experiencing shame.
But that's kind of my point, though, is that instead of addressing the issue and trying to solve the issue, it's swept under the rug and then it becomes a problem. That's kind of like what I thought you were alluding to. And again, I want to be clear. I am not condoning any fucking acts of pedophilia.
I think we're all on the same page for that.
Yeah, of course. Anytime that comes up, even I think when DJ was...
It's a very sensitive topic. And it should be. It should be.
And I think even when DJ was telling me that story, because he was kind of on that guy's side, even he kept saying, and if you know DJ, he is fucking shameless. Even he kept saying, just so we're clear, I don't condone this shit, but there is a point to be made there. Yes. It'd be kind of the equivalent if you're trying to seek treatment for alcoholism, and then everyone around you starts shaming you, like, oh, you're an alcoholic. What a dick. And you're like, well, I'm trying to help myself. I'm trying to change. But no, I think that's a very good point of, granted, we're jumping topics, but it is a very good point that a lot of times, especially in America, things are swept under the rug instead of just addressing them. It's the same thing in a relationship, even a friendship. If there's an issue that's kind of like been repressed and going to boil over, instead of just talking about it, it ends up boiling over and you lose a friend, you lose a girlfriend, you lose a wife, whatever. It's a very interesting point.
Do you have any other thoughts, Danny? I mean, that's a great point. That's a great point that you're taking something as potent as child rape, and this person should still be able to compete.
Yeah.
Going back to it.
Going back to it. To boil it down to its base level, this guy was convicted of raping a child and is allowed to compete in the Olympics. Like, I'm not even going to say an international competition. It's the Olympics. Now, I know there's some people out there going to be like, well, you know, the Olympics are Greek.
Well, that's the title.
That's twice, bro. That's twice I've been responsible for the title.
I can see the concern.
I just said that because it's funny. But I don't think. I
get where you're coming from.
You know,
what does the Olympics embody?
Yeah.
If it's embezzlement, it would have been another story. If it was fraud, that's another story. If it was, what about, like, you know, transporting $1 million worth of meth? How many people were killed from that? You know.
Well, I will say, Danny, with everything I said about trying to seek treatment and all that stuff, that motherfucker acted on it, so I'm with you on that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, and here's the thing, like going back to your point, Eddie, where like the Dutch are forgiving, and to your point, I think forgiving in that they still let him be on their team, but he was actually tried and imprisoned in
Convicted,
England. Where so and here's the kicker: the age of consent in both countries is 16.
Hmm.
So
he still couldn't.
Again-
He still couldn't play ball.
no,
It's a bad joke. Sorry. You understand my point.
Yeah.
I understand both your points.
No, fuck him. I like I said, if you seek treatment before it becomes a problem, I'm in support of you. If you, Eddie, I'm quoting you. If you let it become a problem, fuck you.
Mhm. How old was he when he did this? That doesn't justify it, but how old was he?
Then he's like, he was 13, but hold on a second. No.
he was 13, but hold on. No, I want to say he was in his 20s. I think he was
He was in
20,
his 20s.
21.
Ouch.
Ugh.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'd like to hear the background on that. I'd like to hear the background on kind of more of the Dutch legal. And honestly, that's a great point for the Olympics. I mean, if this is a prestigious organization and what have you that holds the highest values of humanity, what was kind of the exigency of letting somebody like this compete?
Yeah, there's that. It'd be one thing, like, and granted, I'm not condoning it, but like the NFL allowing all these fucking guys who beat their wives and shit to play. It's a private sport. It's a private business. Fine. I'm not okay with it, but like, it's a private sport. That's their choice. Cool. But with the Olympics, it is kind of more of a world relationship building thing. So to let a fucking guy like that play, like, it's kind of fucked up.
Then
You know.
again, if you're mean to animals like Michael Vick was, then it's like, now your career's done.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Vanderbilt was 19 years old.
He was 19.
19.
19.
That still
doesn't
checks
help.
out. No, that still checks out. When I was 19, I was not trying to smash 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
No, that's
No.
an issue.
You're a legal adult in most countries, if not all of them.
Yeah, no, that's not all right. I still remember, and granted, everyone's different, but I was 18 and I had a girlfriend who was 17, and I still refused to have sex with her. You know,
Yeah.
I know there's like Romeo and Juliet laws and shit, but like even then, I was like, no, absolutely not.
I love that because Romeo was significantly older than Juliet.
I know. I'm just saying the
Now
Romeo
we're
and
getting
Juliet
into
law.
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Oh, do we want to talk about Romeo and Juliet and everything wrong with that fucking play?
Recording stopped. Stop recording. There we go.